So in the last video, we talked a bit about the American dream and its origins and the change in perception about the American dream, and maybe we could talk a bit more about what is the American dream in today's society in the US. Maybe you can quickly tell us what the American dream, if that exists for you, what that means for you today, basically.
Well, for me personally, the American dream is having a high level of financial security, because a lot of people in our generation here in the United States, those of us who went to university and graduated, maybe went to graduate school and graduated, we were left with student loan debt that I think many people in other countries don't understand fully because of the education systems in other countries. But here in the United States, it's very expensive to go to university. So once we graduate, we come out of university, with a large amount of debt that we have to then pay back. And that puts handcuffs or puts shackles on our ability to move up the socioeconomic ladder and to achieve, full financial security, in our lives. And so the American dream for me is, being able to, do the things that I want to do, when I want to do them, how I want to do them. And to a certain degree, I can do that, but there are limitations on how far I can do that or how far I can go in doing that because of, student loan debt, for example. That's one example. Me personally, the American dream isn't necessarily having a house and a car and, a family of, 3 or 4 kids or whatever it is. It's being able to, live in the moment, enjoy the time I have, and have the freedom to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them. And so I have, to a certain degree, achieved that. I do have a certain level of financial security, but it could be better. It could be more if I didn't have certain obligations when it came to student loans. So for me, it is that ability to do things when I want to do them, how I want to do them.
Do you think this is a generational thing as well? Because, like, from what I've read and saw in documentaries and stuff, this is something that the generation, let's say 20 to 40-year-olds, that they are more focused on maybe this aspect of happiness than on having a house and having the family, having the car or something as it used to be.
No, for sure. I definitely think that generation of millennials, I think we place a higher value on happiness and satisfaction with our lives as opposed to financial or economic success. For example, I think my parents, for example, for them, achieving the American dream was, buying a house and having a nice car and, the white picket fence around the property, that for them was success. And to a certain degree, it still is, right? I mean, their ability to own certain material things is how they valued success or how they placed a value on success. Whereas I feel like myself, I'm different. I think my generation is different in how we value success, because I think we're more inclined to do what makes us happy, even if it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be financially better off.
Do you think this is that that there were external factors that basically pushes a generation into feeling like this, that because you cannot, reach certain things anymore. House prices are on the rise all the time, the income in general has increased the way it, should do if you wanted to afford certain material things. So do you think there's a kind of a, that this connects somehow, that this the views of a generation and external factors, or do you think it's because of the view of the generation that that it has an impact on other factors?
Personally, I think it's a combination of things. I think our generation is one of the most educated generations in world history, right? I mean, when we talk about the level of education and intelligence, we are one of the most, if not the most educated generation in world history as far as, book knowledge and how we see the world. And I think with that comes a realization that money doesn't necessarily bring happiness, right? And I think we've seen it in our parents as well, right? Our parents have achieved a certain level of economic success and wealth in their lives, but we have seen how it necessarily has not translated into happiness. And when we talk about the rates of depression and we talk about the rates of mental illness, for example, they're at the highest they've ever been. But at the same time, as a global community, the economic wealth of countries has increased. But that hasn't necessarily translated into happiness. And I think our generation has recognized that and has placed, a higher value on that. Now, it may also have to do with the fact that moving up the socioeconomic ladder has become a bit more difficult. And so we've had to come also to the realization that we have to be happy with ourselves, because that journey to the top is a bit more difficult. And if we go into the journey with the same kind of mindset that our parents had, we're going to end up being unhappy and to be being, not necessarily satisfied with, with our lives. And so we've had to change our perception of how we view success, how we view happiness, and how we view, our place, in the world and in society.
I mean, this is something like that leads me to another question that I've been thinking about. It's like, when you look around or read, like, from various different sources, you have the feeling that this generation now, so like the millennials or something, is like a weak generation, right? Because everyone's complaining they don't want to work as hard as we did, they don't want to spend, dedicate so much effort to something, because if I think of, like, the generation of my parents, you went into a job and most of the time you stayed there for like 30, 40 years or something, you didn't, change jobs. So, very infrequently, if at all. And then, you always get this backlash to the younger generation, basically, like, you need to work hard and you need to, give a little bit more and stuff. And it's kind of an interesting combination, because, as you're saying, if we look, this is also because what you said, maybe because we know so much more about, these aspects, or how important it is to our mental health, like these aspects, psychological aspects about life and, happiness and, being, content with what we have or where we are. Do you think this also plays a role a bit, that the knowledge of, that we know of science definitely tells us that, money doesn't make us happy, or a house doesn't make us happy, that because of this knowledge that we see this more realistically than maybe the generations before us, and that we place less value on these material things?
Well, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact that, we come from a generation that is one of the most entitled generations. We are much more entitled because of the success that our our parents had, right? Our parents, their journey to their success, I think the road there was a bit more difficult, but that made it easier for us coming after them, right? And I think that's what they wanted, right? I mean, all parents say, they want to provide for a better life for their kids than they had. And I think we are a byproduct of that. Now, what I will say to that is, even though we are entitled, we have, as a generation, faced a lot of obstacles that, in my opinion, were created by our parents when it comes to our ability to move up the socioeconomic ladder. And so our generation has had to be more adaptable, right? We've had to recognize that, we have to change. We have to, change our mindset, change our skill set, change the way we view the world in order for us to find happiness and to, in our minds, find success. Whereas our parents didn't necessarily have that same kind of challenge. I think their challenge was probably, more of a real physical challenge, right? I mean, it was, like you said, working that job 8, 10, 12 hours a day, to provide for their families, so that they could, their kids could have a better life than they had. Whereas we kind of grew up in a society of wealth and of, material wealth. And so, in many situations, not everyone, of course, but in general, we had the things that we wanted and the things that we needed, and we didn't necessarily have to work so hard for them. But we have had to, change the way that we do things, the way that we see things. An example would be, our generation had to go through September 11th. We've had to go through an economic disaster in 2008 and 2009. Now we're having to go through a pandemic, which is also causing an economic strain, on our countries. These kind of things are like once in a generation kind of, situation. And now we've gone through 3 of them, arguably 3 of them. Some people may say more. Whereas our parents came out of, World War II. And they maybe had one, major, global, situation that they had to go through and to adapt to. It was there's a relatively high level of stability, in their, in the years where they were the most economically productive. Whereas our generation have had to go through much more challenges during our years of economic productivity. And it's caused us to have to be more flexible and more adaptable. And I think because of this, it's also changed how we view success, how we view happiness, how we view our place in the world.
So do you think, like, if you go back to the American dream, do you think this original concept of the American dream still holds true for most of the population in the US, or who is actually still living, the American dream in its original sense? What do you think?
Well, I think, to answer the question directly, the people or the population that is living the American dream in its more original kind of concept, I think, are the people at the upper end of the socioeconomic ladder. Those people, because those people, they have the capacity to withstand these kind of economic challenges that we've seen over the past 20 years or so. Whereas people in the middle to the lower end of the socioeconomic scale haven't necessarily had the capacity to, to withstand these kind of trials and tribulations. Whereas the upper economic, the people in the upper end of that scale, they maybe have maintained, right, their status in society. The people in the middle and towards the bottom have maybe been knocked down a rung or two. And that has of course, calls people to change their perception of the American dream and what it means to achieve it. So, you know, for the people at the top, I think it's still the same, right? A house, a car, a family, and all of that. Whereas people in the middle and towards the bottom, I think it's more so about happiness, right? It's less about material wealth and more about, okay, what do I have to do to find happiness? Now, some people may value material wealth as a form of success, and you will see it, right? You will see people who are barely making ends meet, you know, but they're driving a Mercedes Benz or a BMW or a really expensive car, because for them that is success. That's still a form of success, even though you may not be able to afford it, or it may not be an economically wise decision to make. They still make it because for them it's about the perception, right? It's about how people are going to perceive them, not necessarily how they feel about themselves. And so you're also having people who are trying to obtain the American dream, but also deal with the perceptions of others and how they view their attainment of the American dream.
Is this something in the German school books, at least, you read a lot about still immigration, that immigrants come to the US still today with this idea or with this vision of, you know, if they work hard enough, that their dreams come true. Do you think this still represents the reality of what, you know, immigrants are living today in the US?
Yes, but to a lesser degree than in the past. I still believe if you do apply yourself and you work hard enough, you can achieve a level of success. Now, is that level of success the same level as it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Maybe not, because the country is in a different place today than it was then. The way we view immigrants today is a little bit different than it was then as well. And so as an immigrant coming into the United States, I still believe they have a more pure view of the American dream. But I think, and of course you would have to speak to an immigrant about it, but I would imagine that reality changes very quickly once they actually arrive here. They see what the situation is, they see what the life is like, and the difficulty of achieving this pure vision of, you know, of the American dream.
Do you have, because you are from the San Diego area, so you're kind of close to like the Mexican border or something. So do you have any like experiences or more knowledge about this kind of the area that you live in terms of like immigration and the impact or the views of the immigrants from, like, you know, Mexico, for example?
Well, you know, first of all, California is the largest state in the United States. There's more or less about 40 million people who live in California. California is the most wealthy state in the United States, but it is also, in certain aspects, the poorest state in the United States. There is a large gap between the wealthy and the poor in the state of California. And in large part because we have a lot of immigrants who come to California because of the close proximity to Mexico. And San Diego being a border city, San Diego is literally 20 to 30 minutes from Mexico. You know, we have a lot of people who cross the border every day. You know, they live in Mexico because they can't afford to live in San Diego. So they commute every day across the border. And that becomes the reality for many immigrants, is that they come to the United States with these dreams and these aspirations, and reality hits and they realize that it's a lot more difficult than they thought it was going to be. And I think many times they either end up going back to Mexico permanently because, you know, the United States wasn't what they thought it was going to be, or they're in the situation where, you know, they commute every day. And so, because there's so many immigrants in this area, I think my view of immigration may be a bit different than, in other parts of the country, because it's real. I mean, you see it on a daily basis. And, you see, I mean, I don't see it, but of people and families who are living in a 2-bedroom house, and there's 5 or 10 people, right, living in there, right? Because, they're trying to achieve their vision of the American dream, right? And their vision of success. And so for them, I think they're more like our parents were, right? I mean, they are the ones who are having to physically work hard every day.
Manual labor jobs, right? Mostly,
Exactly. And so they are, the recipients of, what it means to work hard and to try to, as we say in the United States, you pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, and you just work hard. And so that's, that's what they're doing. And you see it, very clearly here in the state of California.
So do you think like this concept of American dream is also depends on, for example, what you do or where you are in terms of, your social status or your, I'm thinking about if you're a software engineer from, I don't know, Germany, and you move to the US, your experience of the US might be totally different than that of an immigrant from Mexico. Do you agree with that, or how do you see that?
Well, I definitely agree or believe that a person's, an immigrant's view or vision or concept of the American dream is different in reality than depending where they come from. If you come from Germany, in general, you come from a different standard of living than someone from Central America does, right? And so if you come to the United States and you're having to live in a 2-bedroom house with 5 or 10 people, for you that would not be a vision of success or an American dream. But if you're coming from Central or South America and you're coming from a desolate, destitute place, coming to the United States and living in a 2-bedroom house with 5 or 10 people is a step up, right? And to a certain degree is a level of success. It may not be the ultimate goal, but if you ask that person if they're successful, they would probably say yes in comparison to a German that came and had the same situation. So I think depending where you come from, depending what you do, depending on your level of education, is going to also be dependent on how you view your attainment of the American dream.
How do you see this developing? Like if you could look into the future, like do you see any trends, or what do you, I mean, it's like we're just speculating about it now, but what do you think, how is this concept or this idea developing in the future, and maybe in the next, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 decades?
Well, America will continue to spread the message and the concept of the American dream, whether it be through television, through entertainment, through the media, and so I think the purest concept of the American dream will remain, but I think it will go through an evolutionary process as well, where in reality, it will probably change. And depending on, I think, the economic success of the United States will also determine how far or how much the American dream concept evolves. We know that China, for example, is on the rise. Their economic status in the world will continue to grow, will continue to also evolve, which I think will also play a factor in how the American dream and capitalism is perceived. But I still think that this idea of the American dream will, will survive. Yeah. But I think it will evolve into something, different than what it is today.
All right.